when getting started using Google Forms, but I wanted to also gauge where everybody was with how they're feeling in regards to whether they even use Google Forms. So we're going to get started from the beginning, and if you have any questions as we go, feel free to let me know, or you can wait till the end. But I do have a couple of tips I want to include in there, but for those of you who've never used it, it's good to look at it as an overview as well. So I'm going to go ahead and present my screen. So Google Forms is a really great, I like it. I use it more and more every day. So there's a lot that you can do with it. There's only so much we can do with it today, but I do want to leave you with the idea, as I hopefully do with other trainings, that you're not going to break it and that you can certainly try it. And if there's ideas or information you're trying to capture, you can likely do it using a Google form. Some of you have been in processes that we've already accomplished on campus, including the personnel portfolio for faculty. That was brand new this year as an electronic version, and we used Google Forms to do that. And there were some bumps along the way, but we really learned a pretty great process. But you can certainly create a simple form, find out results, validate responses, which is one of my tips. It's also called logic branching. Talk about that a little bit more here. You can change the style of the form and send a form, and they get a little bit more detailed. You can learn how to collect your email addresses automatically from a form. You can restrict responses just so you're getting responses from our organization, and also limit it so only one response comes in from each person, so they're not responding multiple times. And we can talk about why that's useful and when it's not. Also adding collaborators to a form. Many of us are used to sharing or adding editors so that we can collaborate. Instead of editors, in this case, you're adding collaborators. You can also stop or pause accepting responses so that, if you have an end date or a deadline. And you can also use forms for quizzes and insert video and images. Okay. So as an overview, we're going to look at forms, not just my slide deck here. There is a basic look and feel of Google Forms. And if you haven't already used it, or if you want to do it as we're going, feel free. As most Google products, you really kind of have to play with it and see what it kind of looks like. But essentially, going to Google Forms is just like any other Google tool, going into your little hub if you're logged in like I am now. And you just find forms. And once you're there, it looks like this. You can create a blank form, kind of start fresh, or you can use some of the templates that they give you. Okay, so kind of like in Word or Doc, you're used to having those templates they give you. That's a nice option. So for instance, if you're looking to do a registration form, or maybe an exit ticket for some faculty that like to do that, or even just a quiz, they already have it basically like a template for you, and then you can edit it from there. So, let them do some of the work for you. So let's start from scratch. So a couple things you want to think about from here is understanding the icons you have at the top right. Can you all see where I'm hovering over? There's this little puzzle piece, and then I've got this little palette, this artistic palette. Okay. So the puzzle piece is add-ons. I will go back to that in a minute. But the first one here is customize your theme. So you can certainly leave this blank, but for most of us nowadays, we want to make it the look and feel appropriate to the event or the situation. So you can go here, and they'll give you some options to just customize it a little bit more. You can change your kind of theme so that you have a color. So if it's something, for Fitchburg State, maybe you want to pick a green, not exactly the right green, but that kind of idea. You can pick a background color. You also can pick your font style. There's only a few to choose from, but again, you're not stuck with just the basic font if you prefer not to. I'm going to press formal. And you can also choose to put in an image. So if you had an image you wanted as your header, you could do that. Not sure what will. So what happens here is they actually give you a variety of different themes that are already embedded in forms. So that's a nice option. So you don't have to create one from scratch. It's completely up to you. But so depending on what your event is, what your class is, whatever you're using the form for, you might want to, or maybe it's just something you like. So there's a lot of options down here. Okay, night out. Oh, look at that. You can do some popcorn if it's work or school, so on and so forth. I won't show you this today because we don't have enough time, but for anyone that came to the Canva training or is interested in learning more about it, using Canva, which is a free tool, you can create a header on that and then import it. So if you're interested in doing something like that, if none of these work for you, you can do that. You can upload a picture. So here's an example of one I created using Canva. You'll see this technology training one here. Yeah, so when I press that, I can actually insert it here. And now I can change the dimensions and so forth. So just want you to know that that's available to you if you're interested, but by no means do you need to. So again, it's either themes that are built into forms, if you want a theme, upload if you've already got a picture or something on your computer you'd like to use, go to photos, same idea, and then you select the one you want and you can insert it. And then when you're all set, you can press done. And now it kind of gives me this header at the top that I didn't have a minute ago. And then it shows me this color, so I can change my color again. Okay. Any questions or thoughts on that so far? Pretty simple, right? I mean, self-explanatory. Can't break it, but it is a nice way to personalize or customize your form. Okay, so that was that first outside of the puzzle piece. This is the palette. Then you've got your preview button. So it's exactly that. When you want to kind of see what it looks like from someone who's going to be completing your form, you can press the preview and see it. So right now I don't have a whole lot done, but this is what it would look like. Okay. And you can see up here, it created a new tab. So I can just go back to my original tab where I had it in. I can just see this is my preview tab. So I can X out of there whenever I'm ready. So I'm back here, I'm looking at my form. And then to just complete our conversation of these icons, then I have the gear, okay? Okay, here's my broken record time. Always in Google, we look for, I feel like I'm like your teacher now. Always look for the gear or the 3 dots, right? That's where you find everything, don't I always say? I've been saying that for a while. So in this example, you've got the gear. So here's where you're gonna find the settings for your particular form. So again, think of it like in a Google Doc or a sheet, you've got certain settings, you get to decide. So please don't forget to look here because it's important that you decide for each particular form what you want to do. This is where you control your information. So by default, as you can see, this one is selecting to collect email addresses. So what that means is whether you have a question that asks for an email address or not, you will always collect everyone's email address that fills out this form. So if I have a form that I want anonymous, right? I want anonymous answers, then I probably don't want to collect email addresses, right? So it's not really anonymous. But if you don't want to have to, you don't want to forget to include, oh, please tell me your email address, or it's important that you have the email addresses to go back and provide feedback or match, the responses to, then make sure you have that selected. And then response receipts. So this, you can always go to this little question mark here and it gives you a little bit more information. But essentially, you're allowing for every person who responds to your form will get a receipt. Okay, so I fill out the form. When I'm done, Google will send me a receipt to say you filled out the form. So that's a nice option to give your participants who are responding to your form. Okay, so you can do it always or only if the respondent requests it. Okay, we talked about this earlier a little bit. How do you want this to, do you want this form to be restricted to the users of Fitchburg State? Again, if it's a form used for our organization, then yes. And limit one response. So I will give you the example of the personnel action form we created. This was a form where people were adding in their personnel documents to assist with promotion and tenure. So they weren't limited to one response because I wanted them to have many opportunities to continue to add documents. Does that make sense? But of course, if this is a quiz or something that you only need one response and you don't want to, have multiple, then go ahead and limit it. Okay, so again, think about what your need is and what you're trying to grab. And then again, respondents do you want them to have the ability to edit after they submit? Most of the time, probably not, right? If you're trying to get some sort of feedback, information, questionnaire, having them edit it is going to change your results. But again, if it's something like the personnel action I was just referring to, in that case, we had a certain deadline. So they could submit and resubmit and edit until that deadline, okay? And then respondents can see a summary charts and text response. If you want them to be able to see kind of the summary of how everything is happening in this form and the text responses, okay? Yes, so Sandy just asked if we wanted to make it so that we were allowing the form public. So I know many of us deal with other groups and organizations that are maybe outside of Fitchburg State. If you want to uncheck that, that will allow it to be previewed and opened elsewhere. But like a lot of other tools in Google, they will need a Google account of some sort, personal account, to be able to open it, usually is the case. But yes, you can choose to check that or uncheck that. Okay, any other questions at this point? I don't want to go too fast, but I know you can all read, so. All right, so that's important. Do that every single form, because depending on your reasoning or your need, those checks and unchecks might be different, right? And then your next tab over is presentation. This is just kind of how you want things to look. If you're dealing again with students or some sort of a quiz type, you might want to shuffle the question order. You might want to show a progress bar so they know how much further they have to go or how much they've completed in the form. You can also have a message. So your response has been recorded is what's here. You could put something a little bit more personal, some more information, and so forth. And then lastly is the quizzes tab. You'll only need this if you're turning your form into a quiz, okay? And the nice part here is all you do is literally turn this little toggle, and now you've changed this form into a quiz. What that means is now the questions can be graded, there can be a point value, and so forth. Whereas a typical form gaining some sort of information doesn't need to have any point value and so forth. So that is what you would do here. And then you can see if this is a quiz, how you want to release the grade. Do you want the respondent or participant to receive their grade right after they have their submission? Do you want to wait until after you've reviewed it all, and so forth? You can choose. And then you can also see what that participant can view, where they can view the questions they missed, the correct answers, and the point values. And you can always press the question mark here to learn a little bit more about any of those if you have any questions. Any thoughts on that? We'll look at the questions specifically, but again, you do not need to go here until and unless you want this to be some sort of a quiz. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So I'm going to press save for now. Of course, make sure you press save. This is a quiz, so if I wanted to change that at any time, or if I wanted to change any of this, again, I just go to that gear at the top right, and I can go ahead and change it. So I'm going to turn this off so it's not a quiz. Okay. All right. And that's the other thing too. You can certainly create this and then choose to turn it on at the end. It's up to you. So those are your settings at the top right here. And then you've got your send button, and then you have your three dots. So we've already looked at the gear. Let's look at the three dots. The three dots here are similar to the three dots in the other Google tools, such as Google Docs. You can make a copy. So you have this beautiful form all ready to go, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you maybe just want to tweak it for a certain group. You could make a copy of this, save it, and then edit that one, just like we did in Word, right? Save as, same idea. You can delete it. You can get a pre-filled link. So you could provide them with the link where it's just going right there. You can print it. And then something really important is add collaborators. Again, there isn't on forms, the big difference that you're going to notice or are probably noticing now is there's no like sharing mechanism where we share and we change the permissions, right? We share it, we make you a viewer or an editor. In this case, it's either you're sending the form out to people to complete it or do something with it, or you're adding someone as a collaborator. And a collaborator is exactly that, someone who you're giving complete control to edit and review your form. So if you want to do that, you press add collaborator. And once it loads here, you'll see it looks very similar to what you've seen before in the sharing. And so you could add someone in here. So I could add Steve. Okay, and you can see by default, he's editor. I have no other option. I can't make him a viewer, right? I can't, he's just an editor. So keep in mind when you are adding someone as a collaborator, they have full access to your form. Whether they do anything with it is a different story, but you can let them know, you're now an editor on my form, what have you. And also they'll be able to see responses. So the positive to this is in this case, I add Steve. After the responses start coming in, I don't have to email him and say, 3 people responded. He can actually go right into this form and he can see all of the responses. He can see who's responded, how they've responded, just as I can. So that's really nice being able to provide that data across multiple people without any confusion. Whereas when you're sending the form, right, so this is adding collaborators. When I'm just sending the form, I would just be, sending this out to someone and say, hey, fill this out. They wouldn't see any of the responses. They would just see the questions and what was asked of them. Okay, so do keep in mind, we'll go back to the 3 dots where I was, okay, adding collaborators. Again, these are some other items not to be too concerned on, add-ons, preferences. These are going to be your default preferences for forms in general, okay? So again, like I told you, by default, it's going to collect an email address unless you uncheck it, okay? You can choose to make it so all of the questions are required. Nobody can skip them. And if you have some sort of a default quiz value that you wanted to use to save time, you could do that as well, okay? So those are default all the time for all of your forms unless you change them. And we talked about send. Granted, I realize we don't have a lot on our form yet, but while we're up here, I'd like to stay in one place as to not confuse anyone. So your next option is send. You can see here, you can, again, I still have this checked where I'm automatically collecting the email addresses of anybody that fills out this form, okay? And then I can send this via an email. So if I know the email addresses, if they're outside of our domain, our Fitchburg state, or if I know them, I can start to just write in their name, just like we do in Google, Gmail. I can start to populate. If it's a group of people, I can do that as well, like staff, and this would go to everyone, okay? Yeah, otherwise, if it's somebody outside of Fitchburg state, then you would have to manually add it in or copy and paste. And then you can also title your subject, right? This is the form and here's your message. So now it's going to be sent like an email. You can also press this to include the form in an email. So what that looks like is rather than going to a link, the form is right there in the email, like staring at them. Play with it, see what you think. I tend to do it as a link. I just like the look of it, but there's really no wrong way to go about it. You can see you have another option to add collaborators again if you need to. So other than email, kind of like link sharing with a Google Doc, you can do the same thing here. And what's kind of nice is I can shorten this so it's a little bit smaller. I can copy this, right? And then I could go and email it separately. Maybe I have a thread going. Maybe I want to put this in our chat, right? Or what have you. You can do it via link as well, okay? And then if you were needing to embed it on a website, you can do that as well on this last link. And then there's Facebook and Twitter and so forth. So I think the two that we would prominently use, most of us, I know some of you on the call might use it for other reasons like a website and so forth. I'm thinking of you, Kelly, right? Like that might make sense. But most of us, it's beyond what we do. So you don't need to worry about that, but do know that you have those options, which is really great too. And you can always embed the link, that's no problem. So that's how you go about sending your form when you're ready, is by email, by link, or embedding in some location. Thank you. All right, so the other things, so that's the basic look and feel of Google Forms, how you can customize it, the theme, the look, how you can preview it, how you can change your settings, including to add collaborators and so forth, and then how you send it out. But let's talk about the main component, of course, which is your questions. So you can ask questions. So you can see by default, I've got this untitled form. And the reason for that is because up here on my title, I don't have it as anything. So I'm going to call this test today form. You know why I'm doing that? Because I write tests and then I have like 17,000 tests. And I'm like, wait, which one's which? So, but now you can see that changed right here. So I'm going to stop to just say something that hopefully isn't confusing, but I think is really cool, which is most of us are going to send out a blanket form, right? So here's my form. I'm sending it to all of you. Please fill this out. Tell me what you think, right? There are occasions where you might want to personalize the form for each individual. I'll use nursing. I have an example where they have a few students where they need to gauge some personalized information from. So we have this template that's called whatever it's called, right? And I can actually make a copy where I showed you before. And every time I make a copy, I can call it, nursing form Allison student, nursing form Kelly student, right? And I can personalize it for each person. The reason I might do that is because I want to gauge information from that person. We did that with the personnel action form. If you are going to submit your personal action through this form, you got an individualized form that said your name, and every time you sent in information, so there's a place where you can put in the PDF, that actually filtered right into a Google Drive folder with your name on it. And so it's a really nice place to have a repository basically and engage information. So I just wanted to stop here to let you know that that's possible. And it's a really neat option to keep in mind. So unless you are personalizing your form and changing the title like I did here, right? So I have this, I would have to make a copy and change to test form today or test today form to another name. And I would do that for each individual person. If you don't have a need for that, then you just leave it alone and you send it out to everyone. Okay, so if you have something you want to say, please fill this out, whatever, you can go ahead and write that in there. And then you can see right below that, it's telling everyone that gets this that this form is going to be automatically collecting the email addresses for any of our Fitchburg state users. Okay, so that's your description. We already did the header. And then over here on the right, you've got all these icons. Thankfully, when you hover next to them, they do tell you they're meeting. So the plus sign is you're adding a question. Then you can import questions. So if you had questions maybe created in a Google Sheet somewhere, you could import them. You can add a title and a description. You can also add an image. You can also add YouTube videos. You can't do any other videos but YouTube. And you can also add sections. So if you want to just start with your questions, make it like kind of your draft, just press that plus, and then you've got a variety of options over here to the right. So you can do short answer. So that's the idea that whatever your question is, your respondents are going to give you a shorter answer. If you think it's going to be a longer response or you want to give them more opening to do that, then you want to press paragraph. If it's a multiple choice, you can use that. Check boxes. Again, you can just kind of read through the list here. You've got a lot of different options. And then, as I was referring to a minute ago, you also have this file upload. So maybe this question, and you can see here, maybe this question is, please upload a copy of your resume. I'm not sure, right? That's your question. You're requesting them to do something. And so you can see here, it says now all the files that will be uploaded in this form are going to go to the form owner's Google Drive. So that would be me. Okay. So that's the example I was referring to a minute ago, or saying that once the person submits any documentation, it will filter into Google Drive. So you can do that as well, and you're just letting Google know you understand that. And if you choose that option, you do have the ability to allow only certain file types. And then when I toggle that on, you can see the option. So again, maybe you only want PDFs, right? You want to make it simple, you can do that. But you can also consider, if you're going to use this almost like a portfolio or some sort of something in the classroom, especially like we're thinking art or media, what have you, you might want it so that they can add any type of file. So it gives you that ability to allow them to add in an image or an audio presentation, so on and so forth. So you have that as well. And then how many files you want them to add in this question, 1, 5, 10. And then you also can make this larger. So you can make it as large as possible so that they're not limited in size to what they're adding into the form. Okay, so that's file upload. But again, the basics would be short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, and so forth. Okay, you can also do date, time, right? So you can play around with it and choose whatever works with you. So for this situation, I'm just gonna make it, I'm gonna make it short answer because I don't want to put in any multiple choice. And then you put in your question, okay? And it doesn't like me adding in my question mark. Okay, and that's what it's gonna look like. You also have the ability to add in a picture here if you wanted to. Or maybe it's, what do you think of this picture? And you add in a photo, okay? It could be in your Google Drive. You might wanna do a Google image search. Wouldn't this be like the best question ever? What do you think of this cute little doggy, right? So some of you are like, I hate dogs. So there you go, look how simple that was. So I literally just did short answer, and then next to the question title, I just pressed this little image icon and I threw in an image. Okay, and then the person can write their answer there. So don't get distracted by the cute dog. On the bottom of this question, I've got, again, this I can duplicate. So great, I think, because what if the question's basically the same, but you're just gonna change like 1 or 2 edits? Just duplicate it like 6 times and then go and make your changes. So you can duplicate, you can delete this question. You know what, I don't like it after all. You can also turn this toggle on so that it's required. So I'm not gonna require anyone to answer this question. It's just an opinion question. But if I need to know something and it's required, especially in a quiz or what have you, then I would turn on required, okay? So a question like, do you have any follow-up questions? Do you need any further help? You don't need to make that required. Maybe that's just there so that people can answer it if they need to. And then you've got your 3 dots, okay? And this brings you to description. So you can see your description, sorry, and that's up here. So if you wanted to explain this further, okay? Right, so I'm describing my picture, describing my question, okay, that's there. And then response validation. I also really love this one. So this comes in handy a lot of times when we are dealing with, I'm gonna use athletics for an example. Athletics had a form, right, and you can all imagine this, right, where they needed athletes to complete pertinent information. But for some of these athletes, they're returning and some are brand new. So rather than be able to somehow, right, like import and figure out who's new, who's returning, and so forth, we have one form. But in that form, it says, the basic information, like your name and so on and so forth. And then there's a question that says, are you a returning athlete? And if the answer from that person is yes, using response validation or otherwise logic branching, that will move them to another part of the form altogether. So that returning athlete does not have to sit there and answer all the same questions they may have already answered previously, right? Because they're returning, right? Have you ever been in a form and you're like, oh, I've done this 12 times. So it's the same form, but now it moves them maybe to the bottom of the form that says, okay, finish here. But if you answer, yes, I'm a new athlete, then you will stay there and continue to fill out all of the questions that are pertinent. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. I think that's really nice because it allows you to have one form for a multitude of people, but it brings them where you want them to go without having to, again, single them out or bring them in, many different areas. So what that would look like is, I'm going to kind of two things here. So back to what I was saying in the 3 dots, I have response validation checked. But what does that mean? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another section, which is the very last option here in my icons. Okay. So now this section you can see is labeled 2 of 2, right? So I've got 1 of 1 up here. So I've got this section and I'm going to call this returning applicants. Okay. I'm not going to put a description. And then from here, I can make some more questions. Okay. And I'm just writing in a question. Okay. All right. So now I have this, can everybody see that? I know it's kind of, I got to go back and forth. So I've got the first section. You can do this at the end. You can do this as you go, whatever you want. Okay. And then I've got this second section. Okay. You all see that. Now you probably noticed at the bottom of my first question, I've got this little bitty information here. I'm just going to push this down. Sorry. Let me get out. And it says, after section 1, continue to new section. And the reason that's saying that is because I turned on response validation right here. Okay. When I had that on a minute ago, I didn't have any other place for it to go, for anyone to go. So what I'm saying now is, okay, so-and-so student, after you complete this section about my cute dog, I want you to continue to the next section. But maybe after you complete that first section, I actually want you to go to section 2. That is the returning applicants. Or maybe after you complete that one, I want you to submit the form. Okay. So you can use this, dependent on what people respond and, on some sort of a logic branching. So it just allows, you can also think of it as differentiating the instruction. So for some students or people, you might want them to complete one part of the form, but not the second, or some that you've noticed, maybe depending on how well they do in the first portion. And then as you have more sections developed, this will add so you can continue them to another section and so forth. Excuse me. So depending on, and this is based on a short answer. So if I added another question, and I'm doing it in this, so when I pressed plus question, it moved it into my second section. But if I want to move this up to the first, you might notice I'm just dragging it. Just going to drag it. You know what? I want this one to be here. Now I'm going to make this a multiple choice question. I'm going to ask, did you return? And it gives me some suggestions. I'm like, yeah, I like those. So I'm going to add them all. Did you see what I did there? Or you can do them by yourself. You can even add another option, other. In this case, I'm not. Okay. I'm going to require this because I need to know whether they actually returned in order to decide what to do with them next. You all follow what I'm saying there? Now I'm going to go to my 3 dots and I'm going to, oops, sorry. I already have my response validation on, so I need to decide. After section 1, what do I want them to do? Okay. So the other thing I can do is go to, hold on, I wanted to, okay. this other. So now you can see with the multiple choice question how it says go to section based on answer, right? So when I had a short answer question, I could just, move them to sections. But now that I have a multiple choice question, it's saying, depending on what the person responds as. So in this case, did you return? Yes, no, maybe. I can decide whether I move them to a different section based on that. Okay, so here's yes. If you said yes, you returned, I am going to move you to section 2, right? I'm not going to waste your time filling out the rest of section 1. Okay, does that make sense? I really don't want to be confusing. I mean, I never want to be, but does that make sense? Okay. The other, right? But then if you say no, you know what, I'm not returning, I'm brand new, then I want to keep them here in section 1 and keep them filling that out. So if you need more help with this, I'm happy to spend time on it. I don't want to keep you if you get it or you don't need it, but I think it's a great option to have. And many do come to me asking for this. So this is one of my big tips is use this response validation, use this, idea of logic branching so that you can still use one form, but gauge information from a multitude of people, but at the same time, not duplicating information and not requiring people to spend endless time filling out the same information that you may not need again. So there's that idea as well. And then regards to questions, again, you can play with that. You can import, we talked about that. I think we talked about all of these. And then adding a video. So you cannot add a video into a question, but you can add a video before or after a question. Okay? So while I'm on my dog theme, I'm just going to put it. If you knew the URL, like if you knew which one it was, you could just paste the URL into this section. But if you just want to do a search, oh, I lost it, you can do that too. This comes in handy again if you're doing a quiz or any kind of, certainly for classrooms, but if you have a YouTube video even, right? So I have a lot of them that I've created my trainings, this will become one. If I wanted to put that on here and say, what are your responses? Or here's a lecture I've created and I want to put that there. Nicole, I'm thinking of you in the sense of there's probably some sort of HR videos that you might want to add on and then have them review it and give you answers, that type of thing. I mean, you could go on and on, but they do need to be from YouTube, even if you posted it to YouTube unlisted or what have you. So I'm going to pick this one. And then once it turns blue box, my select option comes up and I'm gonna press that. So now you can see here, I'm gonna call this dog video. So I have a video here. Now I'm probably gonna have to make another question where I make this a short answer and I say, what do you think of this video? Or you can be obviously a little bit more specific than that. And then I'm good. And then remember, I have this response validation on, so you need to decide whether you want to do anything here, if you want to just continue them going, and so forth. So before you know it, you can have different questions, videos, images, you can add in images the same way I just did the video, essentially. Okay, we already did that earlier with my cute little golden retriever up here. And then again, don't forget about your sections. You don't need to make this all one big form. Make it split up so that people can follow, not only for your sake of response validation, but also for the sake of the individual to know what section they're following for, you might have various descriptions or needs. So feel free to break it up as well. Okay, so then now that we have that kind of set up, I'm going to preview it. So you can see what it looks like. And all that means is what this is going to look like from somebody who's going to actually fill out this form. Okay, so here's my silly description, right? Here's my first question. What do you think? The description of this question is, this is a cute dog, in case I didn't know. And then here's the answer. So So now I'm previewing this like a participant or respondent. So I could respond, again, I'm just previewing it, but this is what your respondent would see. This is how they would respond, and so forth. Did you return? And then here's my video, so forth. And then if there was more, they would go on to next. You can see when I pressed next, it said, oh, you didn't finish this question, okay? Because I made that one a required question. So as you preview, you might say, okay, you know what? I don't like that after all. You go down to your little edit this form. At the very bottom, there's a pencil. Or you can just go back to your tab up here, whatever you prefer, and you can edit it. Okay, and say, oh, you know what? I don't want to make this question. Maybe it's this one. Maybe I don't want to make this required, and turn it off. Turn it on, and so forth. Okay. Any questions over now? I'm going to stop there. I think we've talked a lot, or I've talked a lot. I shouldn't say we. What questions? What have I not maybe mentioned that you were hoping I would, or things that you might need some clarification on? Oh, I thought of something, but you can tell me first. Can you imagine being married to me? Like I ask you a question, then I answer it for you. Nice. All right, so thank you for laughing at me. All right, so what I wanted to tell you, and you're all being very kind because you probably thought of it, like, hello, how about the responses? So responses, super important. Right next to your question tab, which by default you're in, is responses. So once you do send this out, and in this case, I haven't sent it out, so I have no responses. And that's what yours will look like for a period of time. But once you send it out and you have responses, and I'm just gonna go to an example so that you can see a real live form with responses versus my example here. So I'll use this one. Just loading, bear with me. So this is a form I created that I sent out to some students that were requesting some tutorials in an event. So you can see my real life form. Got a couple of, I've got a couple sections. I've got a couple questions. I asked for their email address. I asked for their name and so forth. And then I sent it out. And then you can see here, see next to responses, I have 13. That means I have 13 people have responded. So it gives me all of their email addresses. Cool, right? And then if I scroll down, it will give me all of their names because I requested it. That's the first question. And I can scroll down. Then it gives me email addresses again because I asked them to put it there. And then here is kind of the data. So what's really great here is that you can get some aggregate data. So out of the students that I, requested this registration form, this is what they're interested in, right? So 76% was interested in more about Google Drive. Okay, so it polls them essentially as well. And I can look at that right under responses. It gives me this, this chart, okay? And then I had this question that was basically like, I agree or disagree. And they all agreed because they couldn't do it if they didn't. And then if there was any questions, those showed up down here. So I can see the responses. This is a summary that just gives me all my overall data, but I can also go question by question. So if I wanted to see what everybody wrote for question number 1, which was their name, I can do that. I can look here, my next question. So let's see, the third question was, what G Suite skills are you interested in? And I can see by question, what response. So in this question, I got 4 responses, 4 is one, right? You can also, dive down by individual. So in this example, if I wanted to give someone, so in this case, I was assigning certain tutorials. So I want to look for each person and say, okay, what was this person interested in? So all I did is I'm in responses and I went to individual and I can see, okay, they are interested in Google Drive, Google Slides, Google Classroom. So I could then individualize how I was going to assign them information. So you get a few ways of looking at information under responses. Again, by summary, you just kind of want to see a basic idea. This is also really great for a lot of what many of us do, right? You're wanting some sort of data, you need the aggregate data, how many people went, how many people responded, right? How so forth. That is here, which is really awesome. So do know that you have the ability to look at it in a summary, a question, or an individual, and any one of those anytime. So I can open this anytime and look at this because I'm the owner. You also see this toggle button. I have this accepting responses. So if you sent out a link and said, fill out this form, and a year later, it's still open, that might not be, you might want to shut this off at some point. So you can do that at any point. And once I do that, it's no longer accepting responses. So what that means is, if you have a deadline, if you don't want people who have the link months later by chance or read their email and they're behind going in here. So you can just manually do that. You can also just maybe take a pause and then turn it back on when you're ready, okay? You also have this ability to create a spreadsheet. So all the same responses you're seeing here, you can actually create a spreadsheet. And once you create it once, you don't have to recreate it again for this form, okay? Once I create it once, I can just look at it, okay? And all that does is it basically gives you a CSV file. It gives you the ability to see it in a, again, more of like an Excel or spreadsheet version, and so forth. Or if you had a spreadsheet you created that you wanted to push this data into, you could use an existing spreadsheet, okay? So that's another really great way to use the responses, okay? So while you're in here, you can see I'm going to get email notifications for each of my new responses. But if you don't want to get notified, just uncheck that. If I wanted to download these responses to have them for a CSV, I can do that. I can print them, delete them, so forth. So you've got some more options in these 3 dots as well.